Ja, is nie skrik nie. Goeienaand almal. Lekker om julle hierso te hê. Dit is 'n voorreg om nou vanaand ook hierso te kan wees, want ons weer is 'n spesiale aand waar ons in hierdie Bybelstudie kan luister na 'n sendeling, iemand wat baie ervaring het en kan hoor presies wat die Here deur hulle al sover gedoen het en wat hulle mee besig is. So ek gaan in Engels praat want ons gas vanaand can only speak English. So Stefan Kern is his name. He's from Ethnos360, formerly known as New Tribes Mission. He was born in the USA. He has a wife, Sharon, 4 children, still in their teens, and even younger. I think the oldest is 16. In 2005, they received their calling and they approached their local church there in the States and asked them to pray, to help them, to lead them to where the Lord wants to use them. The church came back, and maybe he can tell more about that, and they said Mozambique. So in 2006, he quit his job as a high school teacher and pulled out a map with his wife to figure out where in the world is Mozambique. With a 1-year-old boy, they then left, and they've worked in Mozambique until recently. Exactly what they did there, I will leave to him to explain, and you'll hear that all tonight, the wonderful things the Lord did through them. And then since April, they've been living in Somerset West, nice and close by, and they continue to do their work with Ethnos360, or more specifically, the South African or African branch Integral Vision. And we are really, really privileged tonight to have you here, Stefan, and please tell us all the wonders that the Lord has done through your life, and we know that the Spirit will bless you, and all of our hearts are open to hear exactly what the Lord wants to give us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. I hope you guys can understand me. I'm actually from the state of Kentucky in America, and we a lot of times will speak with a bit of a twang, but I'll try and keep that down. But interesting, as Thune said, my family and I, we've just recently moved here to South Africa, and you know, culture is a funny thing. We had, when we first arrived, everybody that we were speaking with, they wanted to sell us things. And in particular, they wanted to sell us donkeys. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. It's an Afrikaans thing. They all come to me and they're like, buy a donkey. And I'm like, no, I actually prefer chickens maybe. But anyway, a little bit of dad humor. I wanted to show you guys a video. And in this video, it tells a little bit about what it is that organizationally that we do. And some of you have heard of the organization New Tribes Mission. NTM is what many folks actually know them here in South Africa. A few years ago, they simply went through a name change, and they're now called Ethnos360, what you see on the screen behind me. Philosophically, everything else is the same, so you're going to see a number of slides in various parts of the world so that we can contextualize better. We've changed our name. So in America, we're called Ethnos360. Here actually in South Africa, we're called Integral Vision. In Mozambique, we're called Visão Integral. In Brazil, we're called Missão Novas Tribos do Brasil. In Germany, we're called New Tribes Mission in Germany. I won't even pretend to know German. But anyway, you get the idea. We're still NTM, so that's why don't get confused by the various logos that you see. Philosophically, we continue to do the same work. So I wanted to show you a very quick video that kind of details some of what we do on a little bit global scale, and then some of what my wife and I are doing, and then we'll talk some more.
The heartbeat of Ethnos360 is a thriving church for every people. Ethnos360 equips its members to reach and disciple unreached people groups wherever they are found. Of the 7.4 billion people of the world, 3.1 billion are unreached. As our founder Paul Fleming said in 1942, our efforts shall be directed where no witness of the gospel has yet reached. That still drives Ethnos360 today. And when we go wherever God sends us, what happens? Relationships are formed, cultures and languages are learned, Bibles are translated, lives are transformed, churches are established. But that is a task of monumental proportions. Accomplishing this huge job efficiently and well takes a network of people each doing their part. Ethnos360 needs each missionary to make the network function. God's plan from the beginning is for different people with different gifts and abilities to work together in different roles and capacities towards His common goals. Partnering in Africa. While learning culture and language, a church planter will develop relationships while working on Bible lessons, literacy courses, and Bible translation in order to present the gospel clearly. God's plan is for all of us to work together, each fulfilling the part in the network to which He has directed us and uniquely qualified us in order to bring others to Him. Would you like to share in the fruit of this ministry? Then would you prayerfully consider joining the team?
School history teacher, and we had one child at the time, and that's when we decided that we were going to be a part of this, taking God's word to those people groups who have yet to hear. 2006 is actually then when we made the move here to Mozambique. Wanted to tell you a little bit about my family here. Thank you. So you see the myself in there. This was a photo that was taken actually just before we left Mozambique. My wife, her name is Sharon. She's definitely the one that, as we say in our country, that I married up to get her. So it was a wonderful thing that she said yes to. And then Cohen, our eldest there, he's the guy standing beside me. He's actually taller than me right now. So in 1 year's time, he had one of his growth spurts. So he's 16 now. And Christian, the boy there in the middle, he is our 14-year-old. He's actually our first African-American child. He actually was born here in Africa. So we were in Mozambique, but for medical reasons, we ended up coming to Mpumalanga and Nelspruit, and both Christian as well as Wesley, the girl there in front of my wife. Her name is Wesley Grace. They were both born in Nelspruit. And then Alex, Alexandra, we call her Alex. She's our youngest. She's 10 years of age now. And then that we're holding there, that's actually our pet that we called Lunch on that particular day. So I actually was doing a retreat with a group of missionaries in Mozambique on the beach, And this is what they gifted me for doing the retreat. But yeah, so in 2006, we moved to Mozambique. And like I said, our heart from the beginning was to equip people, equip individuals, equip churches to this notion of the fact that we have so many unreached people groups, unengaged people groups. I was excited when Danelle called me a few weeks back, maybe about a week and a half ago, and she asked me if I would consider sharing here at the church. And I've already heard a little bit about what you guys, kind of what your heartbeat is as a church body, and it excites me that we have a church here whose heartbeat is also that of God's, which is for those unreached people groups of the world. So that's what my wife and I came here to do in Mozambique, and we've spent the last 15 years of our life there. I wanted to show you some pictures and tell you a little bit about maybe how we went about doing that. One of the first things that we do, and it's foundational to all that we do, is we base all that we do on God's Word. We spend time teaching the individuals, folks who are interested in cross-cultural ministry, in leaving their culture, going to those people groups who have yet to hear God's Word. We teach them based foundationally out of God's Word. It looks very different than what it might look like here in this country, where we might be teaching in church settings, in building settings. This was my classroom in Mozambique, underneath the tree. I would be taking it. You know, Jesus said that as you go, teach people to obey everything I've commanded you. So we did it in the fields while we were interacting with them. We primarily focused on the young people there in Mozambique. For some reason, God put them on our heart. It's not that we won't interact with older people, but we love that younger generation. Kind of the if you would, 18 to 25 years of age. Here in this country, maybe university-age students. Touch on that as to why we actually transitioned to South Africa, but it had to do with that age group. But it's something that really excites us to try and motivate and encourage them, come alongside them and teach them. So these were a group of people that I would have with me. Typically, they would spend about 2 years with me. And I would walk with them, discipling them, teaching them. And the exciting thing is what we've actually been able to see now is many of them have gone out. In fact, I just had the opportunity in the month of July to go back into Mozambique and visit some of these guys, these young men who have said, you know what, I want to go to these remote communities that don't have a church, that don't have a witness to the gospel, and I want to be doing church planting, kind of what we had been training them to do, equipping them to do. Exciting to see that. My wife had an incredible ministry with the mothers and the ladies there in Mozambique. I told you she's a social worker by vocation, focusing specifically in the area of mental health. And one of the things that we have noticed as we've spent years now overseas and now with families, with children, is we see there's a lot of struggles that a lot of the children of missionaries, when they go into these cross-cultural settings, many of them have. And so part of the equipping that we do is working with candidates as they're getting ready to move into these cultures that they don't understand maybe, but the impact that it might have on the kids. And how when God calls us, He doesn't just call me, and then my wife comes along for the ride. Nor does He call just my wife and I, but He actually calls our family. And so how to be able to kind of monitor that and work in that with kids. She does a lot of work as well with outside organizations, does quite a bit of work in the area of child safety and protection, teaching workshops around the world and doing a lot of investigations that unfortunately may need to be investigated if there's cases of abuse and things like that. But God, we've seen her just working in tremendous ways. Her full-time job actually right now, though, is taking care of our 4 children. We homeschool. And so it's more than a full-time job. And on top of that, she has me to take care of as well. So that's... We joke many times that we were her case studies in mental health, and And maybe it's not really that far off of a joke, but we would have these young guys in our house. You know, it was so important. Aside from the actual teaching that we would do, and teaching how to better learn languages and how to better teach God's Word and how you would communicate, these guys needed to be in our homes. And that was such a valuable, valuable lesson. If you go back and talk to these guys now in Mozambique, because over the years we've had a number that have come through, for them to be able to see a Christian family and what that looks like. Not an American family or not a Mozambican family, but a family that's based actually on God's words. And guys, I'll be the first to admit, we're not perfect, and they saw that. But just for them to see, how is it that I treat my wife? How is it that my wife treats me? How do I treat my kids? How do my kids treat me? And how do the kids treat each other? It's important for them because many of these young fellows were coming from quite broken homes. And for them to be able to see just what a family looks like, blemishes and all, but how we respond to that, that was very important for them. This past year, during COVID, we actually were in South Africa in March of 2020, here in Cape Town, in Stellenbosch. We were staying there visiting some friends. And our plan was to be here through the month of April and then return to the U.S., touch base with some of our supporting churches. And I think we all can remember back in March of 2020 what happened. We were actually advised, hey, if you want to get out of the country, you better leave now. So we had tickets with South African Airlines. I actually joke that we've invested in South African Airlines now because we had 6 tickets purchased to the U.S. round trip. We get to the Johannesburg airport, and as we're actually walking up to the ticket counter, everything canceled. And I think to this day, South African Airways is no longer flying, at least internationally. So I invested in that company. I'm still waiting to see the returns of it. Maybe it'll happen. Well, we ended up eventually via Turkey, actually. It's interesting how the Lord took us back to America. But via Turkey, we ended up making it back to the U.S. While I was there in America, there's a group of folks from YWAM in Mozambique. We have a very strong partnership with YWAM. I teach some of their modules in their discipleship training school. So they called me and they said, listen, everybody is doing things on Zoom now. Would you mind teaching your module still? And so I'd never done it before over Zoom, but we tried it here, and I think it worked okay. So you see me up on the screen in the far back there. That's Zoom, and the students there in Mozambique kind of all got together. We had some issues obviously with the time change, but either I was going to be very tired or they were going to be staying up late, but it worked. So teaching was able to continue even during this past year of COVID. We did in Mozambique, and this was our reality. I don't know how different it is necessarily in our reality here in South Africa. We're learning this still. But in Mozambique, our reality was we could equip people to take God's word to those people groups who've never heard. But the model that we have in the West, that model being one of I would go to my churches and friends and get financial support and partnership for them to send me financially. That model was not working in Mozambique. And what we've discovered in much of rural Africa, it does not work. So we began exploring with the church in Mozambique, how can we address this issue? Because we had people that were equipped to go, but then they could not go from a sustaining standpoint. The churches there just were not economically viable to be sending them. So they asked us, they said, would you be willing to kind of develop an income-generating aspect of your equipping program? And so that's what my wife and I, we spent quite a bit of time doing. Here you see tomatoes. Tomatoes were one of ours. I think I should probably actually back up one more before this, because we began teaching this for some time. And we would teach the people how you can actually grow food and reap the benefits, and you don't need to be going to the store to buy and this and that. So that's what we taught. And then what I did is I would go to the market and I would buy my groceries. And there was a huge disconnect there from what I was saying and what I was modeling. And it hit us like a ton of bricks a number of years ago, about halfway through our time in Mozambique. I'm a bit slow learner. But that's when we decided, we need to model this. And so we decided to seek out land that we could actually do what we were teaching in this income generating. And that developed into this sustainable farm that we lived on as a family and modeled, built a house, grew things, and these pictures that you see kind of came from that. So we did tomatoes. Tomatoes was one of a great cash crop there for the Mozambicans. They put tomatoes in just about everything, and so this turns out quite well to be able to grow it, grow surplus, and then sell it. My boys, as most young teenagers want to do, they want to earn their pocket money as well. And so we decided that we were going to explore chickens. Mozambicans in rural Africa and rural Mozambique, they don't have refrigerators. So everything needs to be done live. You don't get frozen birds and sell it or give it or anything to a Mozambican because it does them absolutely no good. They have to eat it almost right there on the spot, otherwise it will spoil. So what we do instead is we raise chicks from day-old chicks all the way until about 6 weeks. And then at 6 weeks, we sell the birds live and are able to make money. This particular program here, we did about 200 birds at a cycle, and then selling the birds to the locals, and my boys were able to earn kind of their pocket money. Again, modeling as a family how you can do this. We were actually able to earn enough just from the birds in a year's cycle. But we did about 5 to 6 cycles a year, and we were able to earn enough to support a Mozambican family for a year just in doing birds alone. And this is something that they can then do themselves. Some tremendous avenues. We did things a little different. You see here, if you're familiar at all with raising chickens, a lot of people like to raise them in these big houses and stuff. We instead actually built what I call the first chicken tractor in Mozambique, and that's where we would actually put the chickens and then set them in our fields. And just kind of as they grew, we would expand it, but we would move it through the fields using the principle of soil regeneration. And so the manure from the chicken would go right into our fields, and we would keep moving the chickens around our fields there, fertilizing our fields and so on and so forth, and then we would sell them. That was our dog there who, in theory, was our guard dog, but he enjoyed playing quite a bit with the chicks as well. So the principles that we used was something called regenerative agriculture. A beautiful picture of what Christ actually has done in our life. He's regenerated us from a life of sinfulness, and He has taken that heart of stone that we have and turned it into a heart of flesh. This was our land when we first got it. This is what it looked like here. When we were first asked to move into this area, we talked to the local leaders and explained what it was that we were wanting to do. They wanted to give us some of the best land that existed there from a fertile standpoint. And my wife and I looked at these two plots of land, one that was quite fertile and one that looked like the beach, just complete sand. And as we were mulling it over, of course, the inner person of me kind of was drawn to the nice fertile land. But then I was reminded of a story in the Old Testament of Abraham and his nephew, when they said, you know what, we need to separate. And they went up on the mountain and looked around, and Abraham said, Lot, if you go this way, I'll go this way. If you go this way, then I'll go this way. And Lot picked the very fertile plains. And Abraham went to the desert, if you would, of sorts. But Abraham also believed in the promises of God and the promises that were given in Genesis, that the land will provide for you if you steward the land. So we didn't know anything about regenerative agriculture. I've spent quite a bit of time with a friend of mine in Zimbabwe, a fellow by the name of Brian Aldrieve, who has developed an incredible resource here on the continent. Used to be called Farming God's Way. It's since been changed to Foundations for Farming. But just an incredible man of God who went into the forest to look and see what does the Bible say about agriculture. So this is what our land looked like: sand and rocks. But we believed that promise in Genesis that if we steward the land, that it will provide for us. And we didn't know how to do it, but he said, hey, let's learn. Let's model this to the locals. So you have a lot of slash and burn in Mozambique, and that's destroying a lot of the farmland there in Mozambique. Fires that just get out of control. So this is right near our property. But this is what it looked like. This is my wife. This became a family affair. This is my wife, starting very small, just trying to get a small plot of ground here, and let's just do some tests on it. Again, using the principle that God gave us, that when you're faithful in the little things, then you can be held responsible for greater things. The kids all got in there. We would dig a hole. We would put some chicken manure in there. We had local lime as well that you could put in there, mix it up in there, and then plant. So I have this photo here. This was one of our first attempts at corn. So we're planting corn. You can see just the white sand all around. I've had a couple of crops planted further on down there. But guys, this right here, just to give you an impact, a personal testimony as to what regenerative agriculture will do. This right here was taken in about 2016, and then 3 years later, this exact same spot, this is what it looks like. And this is just time after time, going back to the Bible and going back and not be concerned what you can take out of the ground, but be concerned what you can put in. Biblical principles that Jesus used. Not looking to see what he could get from people, but constantly investing in people. Those same principles using here in the land. The corn, then, we harvest it, and this is the corn, very similar to pups here in this country. We called it shima, but it's a product that we will eat every single day in Mozambique. And if you're able to grow, we got it down to where you had a field that was 16 meters by 39 meters. And a field 16 by 39 is actually sufficient maize to feed a family of 6 for an entire year. Very small but intensive farming that we would do. And so this is what we have here, and we would be harvesting it. And then the way we would take the corn, actually, the kernels off the cob. Again, very local, using local resources. And this is putting it in a bag and just beating it to death. And my son, this is Christian, he loved hanging out there and doing those sorts of things. We also produced rice. There was a very low-lying area in the particular area, the land that we had, and so we would produce rice. And the idea was grow all the food that we needed, the basics that we needed to survive as a family. And so we had corn, we had rice. There's the field harvest time. This was a product that we called mandioca in Mozambique. It's cassava. It's the root, the root plant, manioc plant. I actually am looking for this here in South Africa. If any of you guys know where I can get some, I love this. This is one of my favorite meals to eat, even greater than potatoes. But I was actually at Checkers the other day, and I asked somebody, and they looked at me, and they're like, "No, don't even know what it is." So finally, the manager came down, and I pulled out my phone. I showed him, and he's like, "Don't have a clue what that is. We don't serve that here." So yeah, probably I'm not going to find it at a Checkers, but maybe in some of the informal markets. But this is what it looks like here. The root, once you pull it out of the ground, and again, the way we had designed it is we would be eating this once a week, and so we actually had it down to the number of plants because the farm that we had was only 1 hectare. 100 meters by 100 meters. So on that 1 hectare, you have your house, and then you have your field strategically placed, crop rotation and things like that. And so we only had about 30 plants of this mandioca, of this cassava roots. And that was enough for us to eat mandioca once a week throughout the course of the entire year. We also did sweet potatoes. We preferred the sweet potatoes for the nutritional value, really the lower sugar content than the regular white potatoes. Bananas we had growing all on this 1 hectare plot. Guavas was something else that you could actually use to sell. Beans, this was our main source of protein. And we would be able to harvest this and then store it for the course of the year, and have beans for again, our protein that we would eat, along with, say, the birds, the chickens. Purple onions, we grew this. This became a cash crop that we would use. And again, modeling this for the locals, because what our heart was to be able to come alongside and equip these Mozambicans, and then they would move into these unreached, unengaged areas and take these agriculture principles that they were equipped in and actually be able to live off of these principles. And again, keep in mind, we got the worst land possible, intentional, so that we could model to them, hey, this is possible to do this. But it didn't come without challenges and difficulties. You know, a lot of those pictures, they look really cool and really nice and so forth. You guys know what this is, maybe. This is a malaria test. The Plasmodium falciparum test, the cerebral malaria. In 2019, my family, we had probably, as a family, in 1 year alone, we had it about 20 times. So that's 6 of us. Each of us were getting it just rapidly. I mean, the bush in northern Mozambique where we were was just filled with malaria. There came one time when I actually traveled to the UK, and I actually took malaria with me, unbeknownst. I got stuck in a Scottish. I happened to be in Scotland at the time, and I got stuck in a hospital there. And I became the case study. It happened to be a teaching hospital, and so the Lord had it that there was a doctor who had done his internship in Kenya, and he happened to be on staff at that hospital, and so he of course got all excited, and I had so many med students coming in and just kind of poking at me and looking at me that you don't see malaria there. So that was my life. I was there to do a ministry trip, and I ended up spending most of it in the hospital. My wife, on one trip that she did doing some of her teaching and training, I was alone with the kids. She was out traveling internationally, and I got a call that she actually was put in the ICU because of malaria that she got. And the doctors, to this day, if we talk to them, they're surprised that she made it. They never expected her to make it. So it's a very real thing. You have a lot of this type of sickness in these areas. But I tell people, because people ask me, why in the world would you take your family, kids, into an area like this? And we talk about the fact that, the easy to reach places, they've already been reached with the gospel, many of them. I mean, they're unreached people groups of the world, and they're unreached for a reason. If it's a really nice area, very few difficulties, quite honestly, there's going to be somebody willing to go there. But in those areas where you have malaria, where you have typhoid, where you have ISIS, where you have other things going on, a lot of times we're like, yeah, maybe I don't want to go there. And many of those places remain unreached. So I'm excited about this, what you guys are going through this week with your missions week. And maybe the challenges for particularly some of you young people, those in that back corner over there, the opportunities that you guys have to consider, what is it that the Lord would have me do? Recognizing that there's still unreached people groups in the world. This is a picture of my son. This is what malaria does to you. Curls up on the couch, and you just have shivers. It's actually, to the best of my knowledge, I have not had COVID yet, and I know that COVID is a deadly disease. But I've talked to friends that have had COVID and others who have also had malaria. And these are all the ones that have recovered from COVID, obviously, but they say, oh, it wasn't as bad as malaria, just the fevers and the body aches and things like that. It's just an incredible debilitating sickness. We have a lot of violence in that area of Mozambique. I think you guys have been witnessing some of it in the news and the media of a lot of the beheadings that have been going on. This was actually a photo that I took as I was driving in one of the local towns there. You just get caught kind of in the middle of this riot. And, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. You have to be careful what goes on. We had probably the last year that we were in Mozambique on our farm, we had it invaded about 3 or 4 times. The last time, we actually had a group of about 7 guys come with katanas in the middle of the night, about 2 in the morning, and tried to break in to our house. We had some guards that were outside, but they were cut up quite badly, and then the only thing that really saved us was the dog. We had, you saw that dog there, he was able to keep them at bay. But it wasn't until we were able to get help come from outside that the guys fled. They weren't able to get into the house, thankfully. It was a house that I built, and built it kind of to maybe different standards than some of the local houses. But yeah, it's a very real thing what we have with danger happening there in northern Mozambique. This photo here is a photo of my youngest daughter. There's nothing wrong with her. She's just tired and she's sleeping. But I love this photo because I think as parents, as when we consider going into these areas, our kids are some of our most cherished gifts that we've been entrusted. They're not ours. They belong to God. God's just sort of said, hey, could you not screw this up, Try raising this child for a little bit, but then she really belongs to me. And so it's something that we are very much aware of. We're very much aware that our kids are our first disciples. These are the ones that we pour into. And we had an incident. Colleagues of ours, she's Australian, he is American, and they had a child a little bit younger than our Alex, who got sick, and within we're talking, this was about a year ago. Literally within 3 days, the child died in his mother's arms. And they're very isolated, very alone out there. Everything, funeral, burial, all that stuff had to be done within 24 hours. And we actually were in America at the time that it happened. But it's tough. It's tough. But when you think about guys before us, even you think about those guys in the 1950s in Ecuador, Jim Elliot, Nate Saint, those 5 guys, those martyrs who died taking the gospel. You think of others that we know in Bolivia who were killed. Similar type situation. Others in Colombia that were killed. I had a friend in the Philippines, a man that was killed by the Abu Sayyaf there. He and his wife, but he was the only one killed. Then here as early as 2018, I think it was, there was a young American that was killed off the coast of India doing an outreach project to a people group there. This happens. This is a very real thing. So to understanding what the cost is. So a lot of people ask us, well, why do you do this then? Because of this. Why do you do this? And I wanted to show a second video here. Kind of gives us sort of an idea maybe of why we do this. And I hope this video can speak to your heart as it has to mine. Some of the context of this is actually in America. But I think it will be applicable here.
Jesus told us 2,000 years ago. Jesus told us 2,000 years ago that our mission is to go and make disciples. He also promised us that only after we receive the blessing of His return will we receive the blessing of His return. How are we doing accomplishing our mission? How are we doing accomplishing our mission? Let's classify the 7 billion people. Let's classify the 7 billion people on the earth today. Let's start with the Christians. About 33% of the world's population. About 33% of the world's population would identify itself as Christian. We call this segment of the population World C. It's important to remember that not all of the people that fall into World C are true believers in Christ. They merely identify themselves as Christian because they live in a country where everyone is considered Christian. So they would do the same. There's the 38% of the world that has access to the gospel, but has chosen not to follow Jesus. Churches have Bibles in their language, friends or churches nearby, friends or co-workers, or access to other Christian resources, or access to other Christian resources in their language. These people have access to the good news, but just haven't acted on it yet. This segment of the population is called. That leaves us with 29% of the world. That leaves us with 29% out of every 4 people on this planet. Just over 1 out of every 4 people on this planet who not only have never heard of Jesus, hearing the good news. They have no chance of hearing the good news. They have no access to the gospel. They have no access to the gospel, no believers nearby, no chance to believers nearby, no chance to learn about Jesus. We call that 29%. Now on to missionaries. Only one out of every 1,800 Christians in World C decides to serve as a cross-cultural missionary. We can pull 400,000 missionaries out of that World C population. That's our total cross-cultural missionary force. Did you know that 72% of all our missionaries are going to World C? The vast majority of the missionaries being sent out are going to the people of the world that have Bibles and established churches. 25% of the missionaries are sent to 25% of the missionaries are sent to World B, where there is already some access to the church and to the Bible. That leaves only 3% of the total missionary force to handle all of World A without any section of the population without any chance of hearing about Jesus. 29% of the world has no way to hear the gospel. We're sending only a tiny portion of our Christian workers. What about finances? What about finances? All those Christians in World C earn a total of $42 trillion. Together, they give about $700 billion to Christian causes each year. That includes everything: churches, Christian youth programs, churches, youth programs. Can you do the math? Etc. Less than 2% of Christian income is being given to Christ's causes. Out of that 700 billion given to all Christian causes, only 45 billion is given to missions specifically. That's a little over 6%. There is more money reported embezzled from the church each year than is given to missions. Remember those 400,000 missionaries? We have $45 billion to support them. But how exactly is it allocated? $39 billion goes to World C. $39 billion goes to World C. 87% of that missions money is being spent in areas of the world that have Bibles and churches available. 5.4 billion, or 12%, goes to World B. 12% goes to World B. Access to the gospel message. Those that have access to the gospel message that leaves only $450 million. That leaves only $450 million of all missions money. 1% of all missions money. The least reached people of the world. The least reached people of the world. Into perspective. Annually, Americans spend more money on Halloween costumes than gets sent to World A. Than gets sent to World A. Only 3% of our missionary force, armed with only 1% of missions given, is going out to reach the 2 billion people who don't have access to the gospel. 2 billion people are still waiting for the good news of Jesus Christ. So here's a question for you. What are you going to do to change that?
So that became our reality. This is one of the reasons why we do what we do. Romans 10, I wanted to end with this. Romans 10, 14 and 15. How then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? And how shall they preach except they be sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of them that preach the gospel of peace and bring glad tidings of good things. And that is our prayer for my wife and I right now at this stage of our life. That is our prayer for the church here in South Africa. We are thrilled, as I said to start off, to get to know you guys as a church body. We've heard tremendous things. There's actually very few churches that I know in America that do something like you guys are doing here, which is an entire week focused on missions and then targeting those unreached, unengaged people groups. That is something that we believe is the heartbeat of God. And for you guys as a church congregation and a church body, I hesitate applauding you, but at the same time, you guys need to be encouraged by that, but recognize that there's still so much to do. My wife and I were staying on Somerset West Side, kind of Somerset West and Stellenbosch. I told you that our heart has been engaging with those university-age students, kind of 18 to 25. That's been what we've been doing in Mozambique. And as we come here now to South Africa, our heart is to equip people to go to these places. And who we want to be intentional with are the university students. And so we've been doing some engagement at Stellenbosch University. That's kind of why we're on that side of Cape Town, if you would. But give me anybody at that age, and we will just have a fun time exploring what God might have for you. So I know we're doing a live stream as well, but I don't know how the questions may go, but I did want to open it up for any questions that you guys may have. I threw a lot of stuff at you. And so if anything needed clarification, I would love to do that, or maybe just any other questions that you might have. As a teacher, that's what I always like to do that, but yes, in the back. Yeah.
In particular, my concern, which has been in my life even before I confessed faith, was the state of even many of our own people in poverty, which, as you said, are in the category of they've heard of Christ, they know of Christ. And I do not yet, who knows, the Lord may call upon me, but I don't have it in my heart to do mission. But would you perhaps have any comparison to outreach to poorer communities within, as you said, World C, for example? There you have the benefit of language, similar language, and also contact with familiarity with Christ. But have you had any experience with that?
Yeah. No, great question. And for those who maybe on the video, if they weren't able to hear it, is we have the reality of a world that's hurting around us as well, not just those from world A. And you know, God is glorified when we feed the hungry. God is glorified when we take care of the widows. God is glorified when we give shelter to the homeless. And I think that is the duty of the church. Ephesians says that it's through the church that the manifold glory of God is going to be made known. I don't know why God chose the church, honestly. I mean, you look at us, a lot of us misfits, and we don't, we divide over this, but God said, no, it's going to be through the church. Through His Spirit in the church is what we're going to be doing. So I think there's room for all of that you're talking about. We absolutely need to. There's absolutely no need to not take care of our own family, so to speak, here. I think the reality is that there are many people, and you saw it, 2 billion people of the world, they don't even know they're lost. They don't even know what to look for because no one has gone. The Matthew 24 verse 14 says that there will be people from every tribe, tongue, and nation, ethnos, that will hear. And when that happens, Scripture says, then Jesus can come back. And we see that actually realized in Revelation. Revelation chapter 7 talks about that, how there are people, there are representations from every culture group of the world, every language group of the world. And I think that's what my specific focus and my heart is to reaching that. But my goodness, do we link up arms with folks who are working in World B and World C as well. Good question. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, what was the name of the people group and what area of Mozambique? So we were in the north of the country, in the province of Nampula. The people group up there is predominantly the Makua. So they have a couple of different groups of the Makua, but Makua is the largest people group there in Mozambique. The work that we were doing, which was equipping, people would come from all over Mozambique to be equipped there. So we did not actually learn the Makua dialect to teach in. That's one of the values and principles that we have, is that we learn the local heart language of the people to communicate. But because our particular ministry and job was equipping people from the Makua, from the Yao, from the Sena, from the various people groups, the Shitsu, the Shangani, from all over Mozambique, it wasn't going to be beneficial for us to necessarily focus and learn one language group. So we communicated in Portuguese. Everything that we taught was done in Portuguese, because that is the kind of the trade business language there of Mozambique. People have asked me here, what am I going to do? Am I going to learn Afrikaans? And yeah, we'll see. My family is actually German, and so I can speak a little bit of German. I recognize a lot of Afrikaans words and stuff like that. But yes, so at the moment, it's English is how we're communicating here. But good question, yeah. Anything else? Yes.
So for those who might soon be called or who are already called, when you come from let's say the secular world, where we are busy and working and it's just this huge rat race, and you suddenly enter into this calling and start to obey what the Lord tells you, it seems like it's a complete sudden slowdown. And can you maybe relate to that and your experiences from coming also out of high school setting, kids, busy school and whatnot? You even mentioned your own business that you ran, and then suddenly having to rely on
Yeah, no, good. My wife and I, we've had to redefine what success means, because we had this idea of we're going to come to Mozambique and we're going to just, whatever we touch is just going to, be wonderful. And probably easily the first 4 years was learning the culture and the language to be able to communicate. And it's not that ministry isn't happening. That's actually the phase that we call pre-evangelism, when the locals are actually watching you and seeing how you act and interact while you're doing that language learning and culture learning and so forth. And that is very key. But it was really from a evaluation standpoint, let's say, on our family. My wife and I would look, and we got to wondering, is this worth it? This is 4 or 5 years into it. We went there to take God's story, the redemptive story, to these people. And we wondered after 4 years, could we actually point to somebody that said they accepted Christ as their Lord and Savior because of us coming to Africa? And we couldn't. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but we couldn't. And that's when we just really had to reevaluate what success meant for us. And for us, success meant obedience and faithfulness to God. We need to be obedient to Him. We need to be faithful to Him. Things are going to look different. And honestly, probably in those first few years, I feel like maybe God was doing a work in our life versus us actually doing works in other people's lives, if you know what I mean. An interesting thing, these last 4 years, from 2016 to 2020, that we were in Mozambique, were probably some of the most fruitful years that we ever had. We were actually seeing people. A lot of it had to do with because we now began modeling what we were teaching instead of just teaching it. But we started seeing it. We started seeing people actually take what we had. We saw lives transformed, income generating happening, lifting people up out of poverty, and then individuals actually going to these unreached people groups within Mozambique. So it was such an encouraging thing for us. But then very clearly, we felt that God was telling us, I want you to leave Mozambique and go to South Africa. We've been waiting and we've been waiting and we've been waiting, and now we see success, so to speak. And now we leave. And I was drawn to a story in the Gospels when Jesus was actually calling His first disciples. And as He's calling those disciples, the Gospels tell different accounts or varying accounts, but it's the same story. And I think it's in the Gospel of Luke, if I'm not mistaken, where He actually He's having a conversation with Peter and John and those guys, the fishermen. And He actually tells them, hey, you guys been fishing? Caught anything? They're like, no. And He says, why don't you throw your nets on the other side? And so they do. And they catch the most massive bonus in their fishing industry. It's like their business now has just boomed. They've had such tremendous success because they've never caught that amount of fish before in their fishing industry. And what does Jesus ask them to do? Okay, now leave that business and come and let's do another business. And so it's like that sometimes. It's like we're seeing success, it's like I'm poised now to just sort of take off, and then God's like, okay, come on, let's go do something else. And for us, that was very clear. The beauty for us, and this is God's gracious love and mercy, but the beauty for us is being here in South Africa, I'm still able to go back, and I plan on going back about 3 to 4 times a year into Mozambique to teach, do some encouragement and things like that. So we're still connected. We're not completely disconnected, if you would. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, I would say, for those who are sensing, hey, this may be something what God is wanting you individually to do. Man, run with it. Run with it, but hold it loose as well. You know, sometimes God is taking you out of your comfort zone here and putting you somewhere else. And we think that it's because He plans for us to do some sort of a great ministry. But it could be He just wants to take you out of your location here because He has a work in your heart that He wants to do. And I think that's what was happening probably the first few years that we were actually in Mozambique. So, great question. Anything else? Okay, if there's nothing, I'm not going to drag it out, but guys, thank you so much for allowing me to come and share. I'm hoping to be here on Saturday and Sunday as well at the Missions Expo, and hopefully getting to see more of you guys and maybe having some more one-on-one dialogue at that time.